wonderful world of Disney. The Wild Heart.
It seems a long time ago now, but I suppose it was only yesterday. I was 10, and it was my first trip away from home. My first airplane ride, my little sister's too. And it took us to a whole new world of new things, new sights, new experiences. For that was the summer we found the Wild Heart. When you've grown up in a small town on the Canadian prairie as we had, the outside world can look awfully big, especially the first time from a bird's eye view. I'll never forget our first sight of Canada's west coast, all those islands and inlets. There was more water than we'd ever seen in our lives. Every year at Christmas, my Aunt Ida would write in her card, "Come out and spend the next summer with us. You'll have fun." Well, Father had decided we were old enough. And so at last, here we were, heading for her house. When we touched down on Vancouver Island, both of us were excited and just a wee bit scared. It all seemed so far from home. But when we saw Uncle Ned standing there waiting for us, we felt better. We knew now we were in the right place and in the right hands. My Uncle Ned is one of those easygoing men you would trust on sight. You just know he'll look out for you. And we were more than glad to see him. Uncle Ned scooped us up like a couple of minnows. He used phrases like that, for he was a professional fisherman, and the seaman's expressions came naturally to him. A couple of minnows, he called us. A prize catch, about to be hauled aboard his boat. I guess we hadn't realized what landlubbers we were. We'd never been in a boat before. Soon we were underway, and the sights we saw were new to us and quite astounding. When we came to a gigantic drawbridge, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was 100 times bigger than our wooden bridge over Copper Creek back home. We passed an ocean-going ship that looked as big as a mountain, with a whistle to match. Soon we had left the busy port, and we found ourselves cruising past what Uncle Ned called Bird Island. I had never seen birds with such skinny necks, and my uncle said they were cormorants. He admired them because they were great catchers of fish. Bird Island was a nesting ground for the gulls, too. And these were familiar to us because sometimes they'd come to our part of the country, even though it was a long way from the sea. They were beautiful creatures, so graceful in the air, they seemed made for flight. Finally, my uncle steered toward his private dock. And there, of course, was Aunt Ida waiting for us. Our journey was over. And now we could get out of our good clothes and begin to relax. There was one more introduction to make our arrival official. We met Tiger, Aunt Ida's cat. She said he was a watch cat and a good one, and as much a part of her family as we were. Well, Tiger was the first of our animal acquaintances that summer. Remembering back, I think I've never known a time like that summer of the Wild Heart. So many things happened that were unusual and unexpected. My Uncle Ned's hands were never idle. When he wasn't out in his boat fishing, he was home mending his nets. For a couple of kids off a farm, this became a fascinating operation to watch. The first morning, we noticed a seagull that was probably the strangest looking bird we'd ever seen. Certainly, he was the dirtiest. And the gulls on the cliffs had been so clean and pretty. Then we realized there was something wrong with him. He was almost helpless. It was Uncle Ned who explained why. The bird's wing feathers were so soiled they were stuck together, and he could not fly. My uncle said the gull would probably starve since it couldn't forage for itself. I think that's when the Wild Heart first whispered to us. It told us we must take pity on crippled things. We must help when we could. Well, we decided the poor gull needn't starve in the midst of plenty. Uncle Ned's bait box had minnows by the hundreds, and we knew he wouldn't miss one or two. A moment later, I had what I considered a brilliant idea. Why not go fishing with a fish? What the poor gull needed now was not only food, but shelter. But being a wild thing, he probably wouldn't accept it, at least not from us. Unless we could lure him there without his realizing what we were up to. It seemed like an idea worth trying. Once we had him locked in the chicken house, we were curious to see what he would do. I must say, he was the oddest chicken I ever saw. But soon he was one of the gang, gobbling up his share with the best of them. It was my little sister who thought up the name for him. Skygak, she said, just like that. I don't know where she got it, but somehow it seemed fitting. So Skygak he became, Skygak the barnyard seagull. It wasn't long before he'd made himself right at home. Old Skygak wasn't a bit bashful. I remember one morning he decided to get into a crowing match with our rooster. And it turned into a contest to see who could outshout whom. In the end, it was our seagoing chicken who had the last say. Vancouver Island has a rugged coastline, and the very land itself breeds wildness. Like nature's animals, we felt it too, as though we were creatures of her wilderness. And we spent many a carefree hour roaming the beaches. Uncle Ned had told us about the ocean currents along this coast, how they tossed driftwood logs on the shore like so many jackstraws. It was a wonderful place to play follow the leader, games of tag. And it was a perfect natural gymnasium for schoolboy acrobatics. One morning in the middle of all this, my sister let out a shriek of surprise. And there lay a young seal. It had been cast up out of the sea like the rest of the driftwood. It seemed to be hurt. And again the wild heart whispered to us. When we got it home, we put it in Tiger's quarters, which Tiger had inherited from someone else before him. And we fed the little fellow more minnows from Uncle Ned's bait tank. Admittedly, the toll on Uncle Ned's bait supply was getting rather heavy. It turned out that our bringing home a seal didn't exactly make Uncle Ned the happiest man on earth. We hadn't given it a thought, but it seems fishermen don't care much for seals. As my uncle explained, they were a nuisance around a fishing establishment, stealing fish and damaging nets. So the verdict was, our seal would have to go the moment he was well. We wondered if adults really understood the wild hog. Then we saw a hawk soaring overhead. It was a red-tailed, master of the air currents, and a thing of beauty to watch. Suddenly, to our consternation, it fell out of the sky, blasted to earth by some hunters from the neighboring farm. Now we were sure that most people don't understand the wild hog. To kill so beautiful a bird. Fortunately, the hawk was only wounded, grounded temporarily, but still very much alive. He regarded us with the regal look of a king. I knew I must stay out of reach of his fierce beak and his sharp talons, and so I carried him home quite gingerly to be sure. Now we had the strangest guest of all in our house, wearing a makeshift splint we had rigged up, and suffering the hens to sit in the same perch with him. A considerable come-down for a king. Yet, in spite of all this, he kept his wild, haughty air. And we decided to call him Baron. It seemed to fit his character. There came a day when Baron's wings seemed mended, and we decided to turn him loose. My Uncle Ned was as suspicious of hawks as the next man, and he brought his shotgun along just in case, to protect his chickens, he said. Handling a hawk wasn't a job for bare hands, and so I put on a heavy falconer's glove. For one thing, it would give Baron a better perch on my wrist. We had done this many times before, and the solemn bird had learned to ride on my arm with ease if I was careful to give him confidence and not frighten him. Uncle Ned still viewed it all with certain misgivings. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see that he was careful to have his shotgun ready. But I pretended not to notice and went ahead and removed Baron's splint. When I went to take off the leg thongs, the great bird nipped me ever so gently, as though to say goodbye. Now he was free, a noble-looking creature, fierce of eye and proud of bearing. His very glance was enough to make a chicken uneasy. When at last he took off, the silly hens scattered and took cover. But I just knew they were safe. I knew I could trust the wild hawk. Then, to our surprise, another hawk joined Baron. We hadn't realized that he had a mate in the neighborhood. But the way they flew together told us that they'd long known each other. We were glad for them, my sister and I. The wild heart had called to its own, and now they were back together as nature intended. As the days went by, Skygak spent a great deal of his time preening and primping. Like most birds, he was quite fastidious about his appearance. And gradually, the old useless feathers grew out, with clean new ones taking their place. He had a favorite tub where he liked to bathe, and he spent many an hour here getting cleaner and cleaner. In time, he was himself again, except that the question remained, could he fly? This seemed to be bothering him, too. And for several days, he did nothing but make little trial flights. He wouldn't even eat. He seemed so anxious to get into the air. Finally, there came the great moment of the all-out effort. Upside down and topsy-turvy, Skygak was grounded for sure. I couldn't get him back into the air, maybe, but at least I could get him back on his feet. But of course, there came that eventual day when Skygak would say farewell. This time, he was ready. His very attitude said so. Sorry to see him go. He'd been fun to have around. But we knew he must. We were beginning to learn that the wild heart will always call to its own. There were days in that country when wet fogs drifted in from the sea, and at times like that we went about in heavy slickers. It didn't matter, though. A little weather wasn't going to keep us indoors. It was on one of those misty mornings that we caught sight of Skygak again. We knew his curious call, and we were glad to know that he hadn't left the neighborhood after all. As the weeks went by, we used to see him quite often. We loved to watch him work the clam beds at low tide. And he had learned his own special trick for opening a clam. It involved a technique of skillful aerial bombing. If a clam wouldn't open when dropped on soft sand, Skygak had a solution for that too. He knew of harder surfaces that would do the trick, and the best of them seemed to be in our own backyard. My favorite memories of that summer was the day the bobcat got his comeuppance. He came sneaking through the fence at a time when Tiger was enjoying one of his numerous naps. This seemed his chance to take a nice fat hen. But at that crucial moment, Skygak happened to come sailing by. And through it all, Tiger the watch cat dozed and dreamed, his catnap undisturbed. The woods and fields were our personal domain that summer. And we wandered far and wide, never quite knowing what might turn up in the way of adventure. I remember one morning a tiny fawn came out of the forest. It seemed completely without fear, as though it felt it could trust us. We wondered what it was doing out alone like this and so young. Then we decided it must be lost. But suddenly we understood its problem. And we knew it had been frightened and probably separated from its mother. Well, we had a place for it, a secret place we knew the dogs would never find. And so it was that our rustic old hotel took in one more summer boarder. Later that night, long after everybody had gone to bed, my sister and I heard a strange sound outside, and we were worried about our little fawn. Then we saw what it was. The mother deer come to claim her own. We ran outside intending to help, but instead we only succeeded in scaring the doe away. Quite to my surprise, I saw that my sister had brought along a carrot. Perhaps she thought she could tempt the fawn to stay. But I think she really knew, as I did, that the call of the wild heart would prove much too strong. In the end, the fawn obeyed, as every young thing must. In our hearts, I think we understood that the wisdom of nature is always right. And secretly, we were glad the mother had found her offspring. We had hoped Uncle Ned might have a change of heart about our pet seal, but such was not to be. The day came when Buster, as we had come to call him, was bundled up in a stout cage and put aboard Uncle's boat, made ready for the voyage out beyond the harbor entrance. There he would be turned loose to roam the broad, free ocean at will, catching as many prize salmon as he cared to. The point was, they wouldn't be Uncle Ned's salmon he was gobbling up. Uncle Ned wasn't being angry with us, he was just being firm. What had to be, had to be. We wanted a last goodbye look at Buster, and so we ran out along the point to watch the boat go by. It's funny sometimes how the tiniest accident can change big plans. Uncle Ned's first thought was for Buster trapped in his cage. And we could see him frantically trying to get the lid off before the boat sank. In a moment, Uncle Ned popped back to the surface, but no seal. Now his problem was to try to save himself. For a moment, the log that had done the damage looked like his salvation. But we could see, and Uncle Ned soon realized, that it was drifting farther and farther from the shore in the outgoing tide. At that moment, Buster appeared. When it came to bucking ocean currents, he was right in his element. For this once, I think my uncle appreciated Buster as he never had before. Now he was more than willing to let this expert swimmer give him a helpful tow. time Uncle Ned got to shallow water, he was very nearly done in. Then Buster came ashore, and we wondered if maybe Uncle Ned wouldn't let us keep him. But this time it was Buster himself who had other ideas. He had felt the surge of the tide and the pull of the sea, and now it was his turn to answer the wild heart's call. Looking back now, I think I've never known a happier time than that summer on Vancouver Island. We kids had the run of the beaches, and a fishing pole in our hands was as natural as wearing shoes. We used to pass a beached rowboat in our expeditions, and except for the fact that it had no bottom, we might have tried it. One of our favorite spots was a bluff above the salmon fishing grounds. There was a place where a river came rushing through a narrow chasm in the rocks. And here some of the Indians would catch an entire winter supply of salmon in a matter of hours. During the heaviest part of the salmon run, netting several at a time was not unusual at all. Sometimes we'd see our friend Joe Bacon there. He fished the place regularly. But we never tried it ourselves. It was too dangerous for us. Our kind of fishing was surf fishing. And we had a favorite rock we counted our own. The prizes were smaller here, but the fun was the same. Compared to the salmon grounds, though, this was one-at-a-time fishing. For me to catch 3 fish took most of the day. Time passes swiftly when you're having fun. But what we had forgotten was that the tide waits for no one. While we'd been so busy with our fishing, almost behind our backs, you might say, it had sneaked around our rock. And now we realized we were marooned. Those riptides looked awfully treacherous. I might have made it, but I knew my sister never would. All we could do now was wait and hope that Uncle Ned would find us. Uncle Ned didn't fail us. Within hours, he was out with Mr. Morgan's hounds trying to pick up our trail. just happened, however, that a bobcat crossed our trail. Then on hearing the hounds, it panicked and led them off on a wild goose chase. The men followed, of course, not realizing their mistake. Then they met Joe Bacon, and he told them where he had seen us last. The long afternoon wore on. The waves were coming in, and the tide was getting higher all the time, and we were getting mighty scared. We didn't know what to do. Then we heard a familiar call. There was Skygak. We were sure he recognized us. By then, my uncle had lost the hounds and the trail, too. Then he heard Skygak's frantic call. He felt the bird wanted him to follow it. And fortunately for us, follow it he did. When we saw the men coming, we didn't know whether to cry or laugh. We were so relieved. When we had reached safety, we thanked our lucky stars for men like Uncle Ned and Joe Bacon and Mr. Morgan. But I think we also realized we were lucky in someone else, our friend Skygak. Skygak of the Wild Heart. All too soon, that wonderful vacation came to a close, and we knew we must return to more commonplace things like books and school and daily routine. But what stories we would have to tell back home. I thought again of our wilderness friends, Skygak and Baron and Buster, and I realized I'd remember them as long as I lived. Strangely, Skygak remembered too, for there he was escorting us across the harbor. We would have known him anywhere. His wild cries seemed almost to call out our names. We knew he was saying a last farewell. In memory, I see him yet, him and his kind, sailing serenely in the clean, wide sky, and calling to us their final goodbye. And so ended that summer of long ago, when some of nature's creatures shared our lives, and we came to know the true meaning of the wild heart.